You know, Kent, we got to do something here because this is the second show in a row that I don't have the applause. I don't have that confetti falling or anything. So we gotta work on that.
Yeah, we'll fix that.
It just isn't the same without the special effects. Yeah, but anyhow, it's good to see everybody out there. People chat away. If you have a question in the chat tonight, we would really appreciate it. So make sure you do that. Got a couple really good guests, but let's see if we got any of the usuals out there tonight. Brian is with us. There's Jonathan.
Hello, Jonathan.
All right, and we got a special guest here also with what's your name? How you doing tonight?
Nailed it. Yep. Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no sweat. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. So you're with Turning Point Action. We're going to be talking about all of that in just a minute. And then 8 o'clock tonight, we've got David Thomas. He's a state rep, District 65. We're going to be talking property taxes. And we're going to be talking property tax. We got a lot, okay? We're just going to all gang up on it, but that's at 8 o'clock. Before we get into with Gabe and everything like that, I don't know if you guys remember, but last week, I asked Linda Caudill what a woman was. I don't know if you remember that. And she was like a deer in headlights. She didn't know what to say, okay? Do you remember that? Do you remember I was asking what a woman is? Because Supreme Court doesn't know. Some of the Supreme Court justices don't know. And she paused for a little bit and she said the chromosomes, the X chromosomes. That's what determines a woman. I said, that's a really good answer. And I was glad to hear that. Now, what's interesting is the Democrats are reading that one big beautiful bill, and it's taken them like 15 hours. They're reading the entire thing. They got to a point in that big beautiful bill that actually defines what a woman is.
Or would have, but for a developmental or genetic anomaly or historical accident, the reproductive system that at some point produces, transports, and utilizes eggs for fertilization. Purposes of
okay, hang on a minute. I mean, she's reading really fast. She's been reading for 15 hours, so she's reading really fast. She doesn't even know what she's reading. But they're right there. That's the definition of a woman. We got to play. Let me just finish this up here.
The term female means an individual who naturally has, had, will have, or would have, but for a developmental or genetic anomaly or historical accident, the reproductive system that at some point produces, transports, and utilizes eggs for fertilization.
All right, it's talking about eggs and fertilization and things like that, okay? Okay, so that means that this right here is not a woman. That is not a woman by that definition. I don't know if you guys would agree with that or not, but I certainly do. That's Rachel Levine, okay? He or she or whatever was in charge of the military, I think. I think that's right. But by definition, not Joe Biden's definition, but by the definition that's in the one big, beautiful bill, that is not a woman.
It's surprising it's even a debate, Joe. Really?
Yeah, I know. It's
how can we even debate that, really?
We're going to try to codify common sense. It's been known forever, but now all of a sudden we need to define just the most basic rudimentary things. It's all just designed to make us chase our tails.
All right, yeah, we got to define what that is. All right, well, we're going to go over to Gabe. Gabe, how you doing there? Turning Point Action. Yeah, you're out of Dayton, Ohio there, so you're still a student at the Dayton University, right?
Yeah, I'm going to my senior year.
So let's see here. You're conservative, youth leadership, policy advocate. Let's see here. You were chairman of the Ohio Republican Federation, or are you that right now?
I'm that right now. I was just elected last month.
Okay, so you are the chairman of the Ohio College Republican Federation. You were president of the Dayton College Republicans. You're vice president and acting president of College Republicans of America. You've done a lot, and you're a field representative for Turning Point right now, correct?
Correct.
In 2025, you testified before the Ohio Senate in support of Senate Bill 1. I wish I had the applause. I would get that going. Let's see. Brian's got some conservative publications that you've written in: the American Conservative, Daily Caller, American Greatness, and very active on social media. I'm a little bit embarrassed to say how many X followers we have, because I know you got like 22,000. And so I'm not even going to mention what we have because it's like thousands of times less, okay? But it's good to have you out there. All right, I want to play this here from J.D. Vance here for a second. I believe this is when he was out in Lima, and I think you were at the event.
I think that what is so great about the Ohio GOP is that we really are strong top to bottom. We've got great candidates running for statewide office, but we've got I see a lot of young people here, many of whom are getting involved in politics for the very first time. And I got to tell you, I've lived a very blessed life in politics. The president, he always gives me a little crap about this. He says, JD, you came out of nowhere. You were a senator, and then all of a sudden you were the vice president of the United States. I don't think anybody has had that much success in politics except for me. That's what the president always says. Don't get people who run for political office without cultivating talent and cultivating the grassroots.
All right. So was that out in Lima? Is that where that was from when he was just recently there? Yeah. And somebody told me there's like 1,000 people. Would you agree with that or not?
I would. They packed out that room.
They packed the room. There was like an overflow, and it was crazy. And that was what? That was a fundraiser for the GOP? Was that for the state GOP or for something else? Do you know?
Yeah, that was for the Ohio GOP.
Ohio GOP. All right. He's talking there about the grassroots and building up a strong bench. You know, it's just like in a sports team. You got to have a strong bench. That sounds like what you're trying to do there with Turning Point Action or not? Is that kind of what you're up to there?
That absolutely is what we're trying to do. We're trying to harness the grassroots energy that comes with this state that you can find in all corners of the state. And it meant a lot to hear that coming from JD. You know, I was there in Lima that day. And, you know, I got my start in Ohio politics working as an intern for JD's Senate campaign. So to hear him say that and really kind of hone in on how the whole Republican Party and the whole conservative movement is really a bottom-up sort of thing where the energy comes from the ground. It doesn't come from, from money. It doesn't come from, high up skyscrapers in New York. It comes from the people. And that's something that Democrats don't have. Democrats right now are being carried by the fact that they have more money than the conservatives do. But our power comes from the grassroots. And at Turning Point Action, every single day, we're trying to harness that energy and turn it into something real, tangible, that'll help us flip elections, that'll help us elect good leaders around our state who will protect our communities so that our children and grandchildren can enjoy this state in the way that we have for our lives.
So, Gabe, how do you go about doing that? How do you go about, let's say, with the younger people, generating excitement in the Republican Party? Because we've got to get the younger guys engaged with the Republican Party. I mean, that's one of the problems with our demographics, okay? We don't have the young guys. So how do you go about getting the young people interested? Is the MAGA movement, is that helping a lot these days? It
absolutely is. And if you look at the polling right now, Generation Z, my generation, is the most conservative generation that we've had since at least when Ronald Reagan was president. That says a lot about not only the Trump movement, because Trump and his movement have a very different appeal to young people than, say, the old school GOP that's being carried on by, say, Nikki Haley or Mike Pence. But it's something that is really inspiring and helping bring that energy to young people because they see the country that they live in today is not the country that their parents and grandparents enjoyed. It is not the country that they read about in school books. It's not the country that they read about in history books growing up. It's a different country, and they're angry about it, and that's what Trump speaks to. And so, look, the polling shows that the conservative movement is winning among young people, and I see it on my campus every day here at UD, which is a Catholic school, albeit, but the energy here for Republicans is pretty notable. However, the issue comes with the fact that conservatives are not properly engaging these young people. These young people, while they do hold conservative views, while they are voting for the Republican Party when they are voting, they're not getting super involved in the process. In many cases, a lot of these conservative young people are not voting. And in pretty much almost all cases, they're not voicing their opinions publicly, and they're not joining clubs or like-minded organizations that can empower them and help apply them in the field. And that's something that not only with Turning Point Action, but also with the Ohio College Republican Federation, what we're trying to solve. And with the OCRF, we oversee 22 chapters at Ohio's top colleges and universities. And that's something on all of our campuses. They're all very different, but that's something that we're trying to help solve, is we're trying to help tap these young people in, this talent in, with the system, with the means that we have to empower them into helping make our country great again, rather than just being on the sidelines and observing.
Yeah, okay, now this is the most important question, because I've always had this inkling of how do we reach the young people, and I got somebody here right now, an expert. So somebody like me, or any of us, how do I engage someone who's college age or young adult? What is it? Give me a strategy, okay? How do I do it? What would be the strategy for that?
Have a young person do it. And I mean no offense when I say that, but when young people are going out there and they're getting other young people motivated and they're bringing that energy, other young people gravitate towards that. And, a big reason why conservatism has become so popular among kids in my generation is because it is a countercultural force in this country right now. We've grown up our entire lives. I mean, me personally, I was born after 9/11. I was born after the invasion of Iraq. I was 4 years old when Barack Obama was elected in 2008.
You're making me feel really old. Go ahead.
Well, every day I just have to remind myself how young I am in the grand scheme of things. We've only grown up in a time period, my generation, where the left has been the cultural and political hegemons of our country. We've never seen anything other than the left-wing domination of media, of academia, of the social system, of politics. And that's what's driving a lot of the force that we see right now on the ground is, a natural state of affairs where the young man rebels against the status quo that he feels is not doing justice to this country. And they're 100% right. Perhaps for the first time in quite a while. Previous generations of young people were out rocking the Communist Manifesto and going to Woodstock. But my generation, we're going to church and we're voting for the Republican Party. We're voting for politicians like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump who inspire us. That's something super different. And I always tell this to people, because I think it is the most important rule. I see so many campaigns, especially the Kamala Harris campaign last year. They tried very hard to engage young people with these fake strategies, with these consultant-driven media campaigns. The number one rule I tell people is you cannot astroturf youth support. Youth support is either there or it's not. And you can harness the support that is there. But it's very, very hard to inorganically create support for the conservative cause. Luckily, two things make it so that conservative support rises organically among young people. The first, and this happened with me, I think in particular, is experiencing what's going on in your everyday life. I was a high schooler in Illinois, where I'm originally from. And in Illinois, we had a COVID lockdown that lasted forever. It was way worse than in Ohio. We weren't able to get the masks off until March of 2022, which is way after they ended that practice in Ohio. In addition to the crime that came out of Chicago and into the communities where I lived, I was able to see firsthand the failures of Democrat left-wing policy implementation on a local level, on a level that I was able to see right in front of me. I know kids who never made it out of the forced isolation ushered on us by our Democratic governor in Illinois. I was able to see firsthand the damage that was caused by looters and vandals in Chicago and the surrounding suburbs during 2020. And that was the symptom of Democratic leadership, of left-wing leadership in that state. And so when I came over here, where I think it's much safer, where I think it's much more affordable, but we have to fight for it. When I moved over here, we saw the same things being repeated in Columbus, in Cleveland, in Cincinnati, in a state that should be much more red than Illinois. And make no mistake, Ohio's voters are a red voter base, but there's two issues. One, they're often not informed as to what's actually going on in their state government. And two, they often don't get out and vote. They're often not knowing, they're often not comfortable voting, or they don't know when the elections are, or they don't have the tools or the means to know who the candidates are. That's the number one thing we're trying to solve at Turning Point Action. Republican turnout is a major issue, especially in off-year elections when President Trump isn't on the ballot. And we're working every day to try to solve that.
Wow. I got to tell you something. I'll go to you guys in just a second. Man, you are very articulate. I mean, very, very well spoken. It's crazy. All right. But before I go to Brian and I'll go to Jonathan, if you're in the chat room, chat, we'll bring it up. I'd like to hear what anybody might have to say. And I got to promote us. This is Ohio Political News, right, Kent? We got to promote ourselves.
Yep. Ohio Political News. We're on Rumble, YouTube, X, Facebook, anywhere. Just find us and actually also share, not just follow or subscribe. Share this. Let everybody know about what's going on right now live and every Sunday night at 7 p.m.
Excellent. You got it. Brian.
Yes. Gabe, I agree with Joe. You obviously have a very bright future ahead, and we wish you great success and bring
Thank you. I appreciate it.
To our country. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but this has been bothering me for quite some time. I've been a registered Republican, all my life. And as I've been getting into local, county government and trying to figure out how everything works on a local level, I was told by an elected official, a Republican, well respected in Lake County, he says, "Brian, you're not a Republican, you're a populist." So I had to run home and, let's look up populist. And as it said that I'm interested in the problems and addressing the problems of the ordinary people. And I was shocked that such a high-ranking Republican would say that, because I thought that's what the Republican Party was all about, was addressing the needs of the ordinary people. And I'm just wondering, Gabe, if you've got what's your opinion or take on that? Is the Republican Party, are they worried about the ordinary people?
I think that a large element of the Republican Party is, and an emerging, increasing element of the Republican Party is concerned about the people, specifically after Trump came in 2016 and really shocked the status quo of the GOP. But there's still major issues hidden in the ranks with the Republican Party. There's still the remnants of sort of an old order of the GOP that cares more about the interests of people who are not the Republican base. Okay, they care more about just kind of enriching pockets of themselves rather than engaging the base and helping solve the issues of working families across the country. And not to say we can't find, I'm a fiscal conservative, not to say that we cannot also advocate for tax cuts and deregulation. But there's other issues that a lot of other Americans are also concerned about, like being able to find good paying jobs, like not having their jobs shipped over to China and Mexico through trade policies like NAFTA and the TPP that only really benefited the company owners so that they didn't have to pay as much for labor. And those things matter a lot to working people. So when Trump came in 2016, there was a massive shakeup, and people realized very quickly that they had to adjust. I think a lot of people genuinely did have a change of faith during that whole election cycle, and especially afterwards when they got to see Trump perform his job as president. People got to see what he was like. And I think that inspired a real change within the Republican Party. Anyone who says that the Republican Party and being a populist are two separate things is, I guess, not reading the news, because Donald Trump is our president, and Donald Trump is probably the textbook definition of a populist conservative in this country. Populism is obviously not a governing principle. Rather, it's a principle for how to appeal to people and how to address people's needs. In practice, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have been an America First conservative fighting force. And that's exactly what they've been doing as president and vice president. And they've been doing that job very well.
You're not kidding.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
Jonathan, I'll let you go, and I've got another question, but go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay, good. We'll trade back and forth. But first, I'm going to get in my usual plug for the tchotchkes that we have at Ohio Political News. So I made up several notes while you were talking, a few things that I want to point out and a few questions I have, but I want to start by commenting on Joe's question. So Joe is asking about the best way for those of us to help who are of a certain age. And I make the suggestion, especially specifically to Turning Point. My wife and I were in a position years ago of helping a Turning Point chapter to start on a college campus. And that actually turned into something great. This is open for comment and a suggestion for anybody that's listening, Joe included. If we can find avenues to support, encourage, and endorse the formation of young, youthful groups within the conservative populist movement, and then maybe invite ourselves as speakers or just sort of hang around, because we're the type who can go in and speak to what life was like in the 80s. And we lived through Ronald Reagan, and we experienced those sorts of things. Our voice, I think, will probably resonate, but we shouldn't seek leadership. It's people like Gabe who need to take the reins right now. And I applaud Gabe for all that he's doing and stepping up and taking an active leadership role. So to clarify my message to our listening audience, if you've got any way, financial or otherwise, of supporting, encouraging, and endorsing groups like this one and the youth movement, do it. Get out there, ingratiate yourself, hang around, offer to speak, offer to come in and be a guest speaker, whatever, but help encourage these types of groups. My wife and I have been very blessed with some of the friendships that have come out of just us simply supporting the foundation of the Turning Point chapter. That said, I have several things I want to point out. We've touched on a lot during this very short window. I wish we had like a 3-hour span to walk through this, because it's a complex and really important issue. I think the thing that I want to lead with as a question to Gabe, and maybe it's unanswerable in this short little venue here, but we've gone in the GOP from a conservative base in the history of the Republican Party and all the great things that we've accomplished. We've kind of turned ourselves into this big tent, I'm air quoting that, big tent mentality, where it was really, we have allowed anybody, virtually anybody, who claims to be a Republican into the Republican Party. And I think that's what's led to this uniparty cabal sort of feel to the thing. So at a certain point, I think it behooves us to define what it actually is to be a Republican. And for purposes of clarification on my position, I actually run Ohio Rhino Hunters, so everyone's clear about my position on that. I have a pretty hard and fast position, but I'm wondering, Gabe, if you've thought about that, and how do we draw the line somewhere so that we start to actually rebuild the brand of the Republican Party?
Yeah, I completely agree with the principle that you mentioned, that the Republican Party is a big tent. I think that right now, objectively, it is a big tent. And that's a coalition that's been formed for electoral purposes. But I think we need to draw the line at being America first. Do you prioritize the interests of the American people and the American nation over the interests of anyone else. And if you do prioritize the interests of the American people and the American nation, then I think that you are by definition a conservative and America First Republican. And if you prioritize America's adversaries, if you prioritize interest groups, if you prioritize your own specific interest group, if you prioritize your own specific principle or something that is in conflict with the principle of America as a country, as a nation, then that is something that really we shouldn't be letting fly in the Republican Party. Luckily, most of those people cannot fly in the Republican Party. But I think you're right. I think we still have issues that we need to address with the rhetoric, with the fact that the Republican Party has become very wide in terms of its ideological reach. Part of that is just by nature, right? Because the Democratic Party, their sphere of sorts is very small. If you look at this graph, I don't remember who posted it, but the ideological spectrum of people who affiliate with the Democratic Party is very, very compact. Pretty much all the people in the Democratic Party think very, very similarly on all the issues. They really don't differ on pretty much any issue. The only issue I've ever seen any Democrat disagree with each other on a national scale is the Israel-Palestine conflict. Other than that, the Democrats seem to be completely unified on almost every issue. And so the Democrats are very compact ideologically, but the Republican tent is much bigger because the opposition to the left is a very, very large group of ideologies. You have conservatives, you have populists, you have libertarians, you have all sorts of different types of people who have very different priorities from one another. And me personally, I think my priority is putting America first and putting workers and families first right here in Ohio and in the Rust Belt where I feel like I'm culturally ingrained here. But not everybody has the same priorities. You look at what's happening right now with Donald Trump and Thomas Massey, or with Elon Musk a few weeks ago. You can see a very clear difference of priorities among different people within the Republican Party. And oftentimes that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that Republicans are a party of free thinkers that don't blindly follow each other. They have their own ideas, they have their own thoughts, they have their own ways of going about things. But I think also that sets us back quite a bit when it comes to applying ourselves in elections, when it comes to applying ourselves in policymaking, because the Democrats are a unified front and the Republicans, it seems like we really aren't. And that sets us back a lot because Democrats get out to vote constantly based on very, very few issues. The Republicans, each one has very different priorities from the next. We're an opposition front to the left, to a left wing that has gotten completely out of control. And that's really what the left has done to our country, is it's brought so many different types of people with very different priorities together. That is the Republican Party today.
All right, let me take a look at this chat. Kent, is this a chat from somebody? It's got our logo.
It's Ohio Political Action.
Okay, it says, Ohio Political Action. All right, gotcha. The power players are all part of that remnant. Look at the budget. Giveaways to billionaire sports owners, hidden tricks making government less transparent. Hey, let me ask you a specific question, Gabe. What about that Dome Stadium? What's your thoughts on that?
I oppose it. I oppose funding, giving the funding and sort of bailing out the people trying to build that stadium. It'd be, even if, for one thing, the Browns aren't even good. So as a Bears fan, I think we can understand this.
No, that's true. That's true. They stink. You're right.
But I think this tax bailout is not a good idea. I think this money has a better application. I'm thankful that at least it wasn't the DeWine plan that passed. I published an article in the Dayton Daily News about the original DeWine plan to take this on, which involved raising taxes on sports betting, which is really just a tax on young men. who are already struggling to gain their footing financially in this state and in this country. But still, I don't think that money should be going to that purpose. I think it should be applied elsewhere, and especially not for a sports team that really is not good.
No, I agree with you 100% there. That sports betting, he wanted to up the tax from the sports bettors and things like that, and it's like, no, okay? You've already got it as high as it needs to go. You're not taking it any higher, okay? But I agree with you 100% on that whole sports thing. I don't mind the Dome Stadium. I don't mind the location. What I do mind is how the Republican Party had to cave to the Haslams. Haslams have given a lot of money to some of these politicians, some of these state reps and stuff, Republican, Democrat, but mostly Republican. And then they ask for favors, okay? So this $600 million is tip of the iceberg. It's going to get over $1 billion that the taxpayers are going to be funneling into this, and that's just not right. Now, when Haslam has a net worth of about at least $12 billion, maybe more.
Yeah, Gabe, I've got another question for you. We had a commissioner in Lake County. His name is Ron Young. He was also a state representative for many years. And in his last day as a commissioner, he made two comments that I'll never forget. He said the two top priorities of government is to protect itself and to grow. The two top priorities of any politician is to protect themselves and get reelected. No mention of what is in the best interest of the average or ordinary citizens, ordinary people of the state. What's your take on those two comments?
The sunlight is the best disinfectant. When politicians, they don't have an incentive to act honestly and do the will of the people unless there is sunlight shining on them. And I do believe, a majority of the Republican elected officials in the state are very good people. And I think that they do a lot of great things every year. But I think that we need to incentivize a lot of better actions. And I think we need to continue to incentivize and shed sunlight and make sure that there's transparency so that the voters and the Republican base in particular can see what Republicans are doing on a day-to-day basis. Lobbyists don't have term limits. That's something that I like to remind people a lot, is that lobbyists don't have term limits, but politicians do. And at least in this state, they do. And we need to make sure that transparency is there. And that's exactly what Turning Point Action is trying to do, because we're going to start up our Ohio legislative scorecard. We already have one at the federal level where we score every congressman and senator on Capitol Hill, but we're going to start doing that for Ohio too. We're going to launch, presumably later this year or early next year, we're going to launch our Ohio legislative scorecard, where you're able to see all the bills that Republican lawmakers in the state of Ohio, state Senate and the state House have voted on. You're able to see which ones were conservative and why those bills were conservative, or why the bills that weren't conservative were not conservative. And we will be scoring Republican legislators in that way, so that there is easy transparency among the conservative grassroots and the Republican base as to what their elected officials are doing in Columbus. And we believe that that is going to be a helpful hand in Columbus for not only getting good legislation done at a quicker rate, but also for allowing people to see what's going on in Columbus. Because right now, you look at the death of print journalism, you look at, how even what's left of journalism has become overrun by left-wing forces. We need a means by which the grassroots can easily be tuned into what's going on in Columbus at the State House. And that's what we're trying to do. We're building that system right now. And we believe that that'll be a very, very helpful force for getting really good things done in Columbus.
Yeah,
that's a great answer, Joe. Gabe. I agree completely, Joe. Transparency is a key to good governance. So
yeah, it's a great disinfectant, like you said. It's a great disinfectant. Yeah. I got one thing I want to throw in right here, and then I'll go to you, Jonathan. The scorecards are great, okay? Gabe. But you know what else is extremely important is a podcast. Getting you on a podcast on a regular basis, I think that would really draw in the younger kids and everything. So I don't know have you ever given that a thought? Because we can help you with that, by the way. We can actually help you with that sort of thing.
I go on podcasts. I'm on this podcast right now, and I go on podcasts. I go on, I do a lot of op-eds. So I like to get my word out there. I like to get my positions out there. I'm a pretty loud voice for what I believe in. So
but I guess what I'm saying is, what about a podcast where you're on every week? You on every week, talking about what's going on. I think I would love that. I think that would really appeal to the younger generation. They need that. They need somebody your age on there all the time. Right, Jonathan?
I would love that.
All right.
Yeah,
let's I'll tell you what, you just said that you would love it. So we're going to try to make that happen.
Well, I would love it, but my schedule is
I don't care about your schedule. I don't care about your classes. I don't care about the University of Dayton I don't care if you got a final exam. That all has to be pushed aside, okay? There's podcast. Come on. Get your priorities straightened out.
All right. Don't listen to Joe, but maybe do listen to Joe. It was actually a couple of years ago, some friends of mine convinced me to start a podcast, and lo and behold, I'm about 2 years in, and we've got over 21 million views for my podcast. They do work, and they're a way to bypass the corrupt legacy media. So Joe's not wrong on that. I will be watching for it. I hope you start one personally, and I'll watch you if you do. But a few thoughts. One is, I love the scorecard idea, but one thing to be concerned about as you launch that is there are lots of sort of smoke and mirrors that happen in Columbus. For instance, we have reps that will back and start and support a bill knowing that it'll die because they want to look good. They want to look like they're trying something, but it'll die in committee, or the speaker will just bury it, or those sorts of things. We're seeing it with HB 12, which is the medical freedom bill. It's dead in front of Huffman right now. Those are the sorts of things that can't be factored in on a scorecard, but they artificially skew public opinion. So just a word to the wise on that one. I can't help but comment on the Brown Stadium thing, because every time it comes up, I don't want us Ohioans, and especially Northern Ohio, to miss the true point of the thing. It's very distracting to talk about the team and whether or not they win or lose, and the Haslams and the support, but ultimately, the truth of the matter, as is very articulately pointed out by John Kalis on Substack and other platforms, the Browns issue is a Trojan horse. It's not there to build a dome or not build a dome. It's not there because the team is good or not good. Look at the number of taxing authorities in the state of Ohio. We have more taxing authorities than most other states, including states that are twice as large as us. We are one of the most taxed states in the union. The idea of the Brown Stadium allows for regionalism. I'm giving some sort of shortcut cliff notes. I hope that people will read John Kalis's posts on this, but we're following this. Ultimately, it boils down to the objective of creating a 5-county-wide regional zone and new taxing authority. And once it's in place, once it's put there, because people will have a blind spot for the Cleveland Browns, it will never go away, and that tax will stay forever. Just like that sin tax that existed in Cuyahoga County to fund the Cleveland Indians years ago. These things end up on the books, and they kill us. They drive taxes up and increase homelessness. So I just can't hear the Browns thing without interjecting that. But to Gabe's point, and not everybody knows this has actually just surfaced in the last 24 hours, at least on my radar. When you talk about sunlight being the ultimate disinfectant, I read from some notes that are now circulating on social media and some watchdogs in Ohio. Ohio lawmakers are proposing changes to the state's sunshine laws that would exempt text messages and emails between lawmakers and their staff from public records disclosure until the end of legislative session. It goes on from there. That's something to look out for, and that's something, I guess, to put a plug in for the work that Gabe and his group are doing. That's something for some really aggressive and tenacious young watchdogs to step in and tackle. Ultimately, what that means is there are people like us, and Brian Massey's great at it, who ask for information from our government and use it to expose bad actors. That's the disinfectant. That's the sunlight. And we want more of it. The government clearly wants less of it. Ohio is at it again. They're trying to change the laws to hide more of what they do from our view. And the whole idea that we can have legislators talking about issues for up to 2 years during their entire cycle in office and hide from us what they're talking about and what they're working on is completely counter to the interests of transparency. One last thing, and this is a question for Gabe. One of the things that occurs to me that the left does really well is sort of a hook concept, hook issues for young voters. So you can have the highly inflated issues like marijuana or legalization of abortion or something that is a major flashpoint that people feel very motivated to go out and vote for. And it's been very successful, especially in off-year elections. The left will pack a ballot with something they know the youth, that young voters at college age are going to turn out for the thing. They're going to want or not want something, and they will be riled up and they will be highly motivated to turn up and turn out for the vote. How do we counter that on our side? How does the conservative movement, the populist movement, counter that with young voters?
There's a number of ways that the Republicans can do it, but I think that the number one way that really nobody's doing at the moment is talking about foreign labor visas and how companies are using visa programs like the H-1B visa and the student visas to displace American labor and replace it with foreigners that they can pay lower wages, that will take lower contracts than Americans will. This was a big issue here in Dayton at Fuyao Glass, is in Moraine, a suburb of Dayton. And the company, a Chinese company, after they came in and took over an old General Motors manufacturing plant, they fired most of the workers who were already there, who were from the local community, after they tried to unionize. Then they brought in foreign visa workers from China. They paid them very low wages. And eventually they got raided by the feds because they were essentially using these foreign laborers as slave labor, obviously, so that they could pay less for that labor. But this is a major issue all across Ohio and all across the country right now, in particular, of companies displacing workers right here in America and replacing them with foreigners who they can pay less. And I like to tell people, illegal immigration is easier to tackle because it's illegal. But legal immigration has often the same downsides. And our legal immigration system is arguably even more of a pressing issue to young people in this country who are trying to go into the job market in the most competitive job market that arguably we've ever had. Especially here at UD, which is an engineering school, you got a lot of STEM graduates here. They're having a lot of difficulty finding jobs in STEM fields. And it's because of all the competition that is being imported into our country from countries like India and China. And that's a major issue for young people. And Republicans increasingly are not talking about it. I feel like very few in the media have been talking about it, but it's a major issue. We live in a very, very competitive job market. Most like 90 to 95% of STEM applications sent out by recent graduates at schools like UD are rejected. And it's because companies can pay these foreign laborers less. These foreign laborers will take lower contracts than Americans will because American graduates have standards. They want a certain level of pay, and these foreigners will take much, much less pay. And that's, I think, the most underrated issue affecting young people in this country. And I think also just immigration in general, because mass immigration and mass illegal and legal immigration has oversaturated our economy. It's made it much harder for young people in general to get paid decent wages. The Democratic Party and the socialist left love to talk about how, corporate greed is an issue. And I think it is. I think it actually really is. But how are they doing it? They're not doing it. What are the corporations doing? They're pumping out left-wing messaging. Look at Disney, look at the big companies, look at Google, look at Amazon. And they're replacing Americans with foreign scab labor that the Democrats continually advocate for importing into the country. So this is an opportunity for Republicans to get ahead of the curve and for conservatives to start touching on an issue that is impacting a lot of young people in this country and that young people genuinely do care about. And it's impacting our everyday lives, because if we cannot find a job, we've spent ridiculous amounts of money to go to school, to go to college, to go get a degree. And we go into a marketplace where we're getting replaced by foreign scab labor that companies can pay less. This is like the shiny gold platter issue for Republicans. And we just need some Republicans who are going to take it.
Oh man, that is great. That is such a like I said, you're very articulate. You explain everything so well. I can't believe that you're just a senior in college. Wow. Okay, let's read this chat here. It says, would like to see more young folks involved in the property tax issue. Now, the problem with getting more young people involved in the property tax issue is they don't own a house. Okay.
Yeah, we're not property owners,
and it's not going to interest you. You don't own a house, right?
I disagree, Joe.
Well, wait a minute. I'm in my 30s.
I disagree too, Joe.
Okay. Okay. Hang on a second. It says I'm in my 30s and pay $10,000 a year. Makes it tough to live in Ohio to raise a family. So he's paying $10,000 a year in property tax. That's outrageous. Think about that. So even after you pay that house off, you still got almost $1,000 a month bill, and that's like rent. I mean, that's like you're renting your house then at that point. All right. Let me go to Brian. You disagree. What's up?
Well, first, renters, those in apartments, believe it or not, are paying property taxes. It's just not spelled out. That property tax for that landlord is the cost of doing business that's passed through, to those that are renting the apartments. And many of the young folks can't even afford rent. What they're doing is they now have to, two or three in an apartment or more, being able to split, $2,000, $3,000 a month on an apartment rent. Then trying to own a home, the American dream is really almost out of the reach of the those that are just graduating from college. Now, Gabe could challenge me if I'm wrong on that, but that's what I've come to the conclusion after speaking to many people about the property taxes and renting.
Yeah. So, Gabe, you're coming out of college next year. Like so many other college students, there's going to be a huge student loan. Going to have a huge student loan, and then you got to try to find rent or a house on top of that. Yeah, it's tough. I can understand the predicament that the young people are in today. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But I don't think, I guess the point I was trying to make on this is I don't really think that somebody who's still in college or going to be graduating from college pretty soon, that property tax is something that they're concerned with. So I'll let you fill the blank in for that. Is it something you're worried about, or what's the most pressing issue? I know the HB1 is your most pressing issue. What's your second most pressing issue, and is property taxes something that you're worried about?
No, property taxes, I would say, is not an issue that comes up much when young people are discussing their concerns, is because like, again, they're not homeowners. They're not buying property. And the main reason for that is because it's much more expensive to buy a home. It's much harder to buy a home. I think that's the issue that people often overlook, is that it's just difficult in general for people to buy a home, because this also connects to the property taxes, because the property value is going up. And that's the reason why property taxes are going up in many cases. And it's the reason why young people aren't able really to buy homes as much as they used to, why we're a generation of renters now. The renting issue isn't as bad in Ohio as it is in other states. I know there's a big issue in states like California or Oregon or Washington, especially out the West Coast and the East Coast. In Ohio, it's a little bit better, but it still risks spiraling out of control, just like the broader property values. And that's something that we need to address. And I'm hugely supportive of what David Thomas is doing. He's a good friend, and I really like what he's doing, tackling this issue that I think is very complicated. And I think a lot of people, for a long time have shied away from, because it's a complex issue and there's no easy way to address it. And David Thomas, I think, has decided to stand his ground and step into the fire on this. And I'm really proud of him for doing that, because we needed someone to do that. And that's the only reason why this property tax abolition measure is reaching the ballot, is because for years and years, the state legislature has been ignoring their job on this issue. They have let this situation spiral to the point where it is now. And finally, we have a fighter, David Thomas, who's going up there and getting things done, taking care of this issue. And I think we need more of that.
Yeah, we do. Now, Dave Thomas is coming on right after you. I don't know if you even know that. Did you know that?
I do.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I saw that.
If you want to stick around while he's on, you're more than welcome to stick around while he's around. But Jonathan, you had something to say. Go ahead.
But really, I think Brian covered it. I mean, I had the same reaction. Whether or not college-age kids, today's college-aged kids, and Gabe, I mean that because I've reached that age with my graying hair, where I feel like anyone in college, I've earned the right to refer to as kids. Anyone under probably 30 has lost one of those key fundamental drives, one of those key concepts of what it is to be an American, and that is to thrive, to own a home, to have some property, to really plant your flag and put some roots down. And that, we go back and we can read stories about it now. And actually, by the time I came along in the 70s and 80s, it had actually been diluted, but it wasn't nearly as gone as it is now. But back in our grandparents' era, and my grandparents' era, it was kind of assumed, and for very reasonable fees. And I hear stories all the time about in the 40s and 50s, people would come up with $3,500 and buy a home, would own a home for $3,500. There was no concept of paying thousands and thousands every month for 30 years in order to try to get to home ownership. And we're fooling ourselves if we don't recognize the fact that property tax factors into that. It's a part of what's expected all of us to pay. So yes, that is a sticky wicket. That's a whole kind of a nightmare mess to revamp that, but it must be done. I agree with Gabe. We have a legislature that has kicked the can down the road for decades, not wanting to face it. And it's finally up to we, the people, to force it onto the ballot, eliminate the darn thing, and then hopefully, with some good luck, hard work, and some tenacity, we can scale back Ohio's spending, because $100 billion is ridiculous. We need to doge Ohio, clean things up, and get rid of property tax so that it becomes reasonable for the next generation to dream once again of home ownership.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to kind of wrap things up here because Dave Thomas, I can see you in the Zoom, Dave. So we'll get to you in just a minute. All right, Gabe. So, we could talk a lot longer. I wanted to get into SB1 and some other stuff. We're not going to do it tonight. Give us some parting information of how. I know you said not to do it, but if I was to reach out to the younger people, how should I do it? Give me something that I could work with on that, okay?
Get in touch with your local college Republican chapter. That's the best way to do it, because they know all the people. They have the contacts, and they know what the lay of the land is on the campus. And they need all the help that they can get right now. Our individual chapters do, because the campuses, the administrations are often tough. It's difficult for college Republican chapters to fundraise on their own, so they need supporters like all the folks, just like regular grassroots folks who from the community who can be supporters for those chapters. We really appreciate anything that people do for that end, because on campuses, even though our generation of young people are more conservative than ever before, it's getting more and more difficult to engage people because of the fear factor, because of the continually stubborn left-wing tendencies of the academic sector, and because of just all the different negative campaigns being floated in every direction. We need more activism on campuses to bring more people into the Republican Party and to help make lifelong conservatives a new trend in this country.
You said it, Gabe. Gabe Guidarini. I said that right. And I wish I had the applause. I wish I had the applause for tonight, because we could really do with it. Gabe, thanks a lot for coming on. Really appreciate it. Dave Thomas is here. I know you said you know him, so if you want to stick around, you can stick around. I don't know. Let's find out. Hey, Dave, how are you? David Thomas.
I'm good. How are you guys? District
65, Ashtabula and Trumbull County, I might add. But how's it going tonight? Very good. And, of course, Gabe, you're under no obligation to stay if it's not, but you're welcome to stay because, hey, more the merrier. That's the way I look at things.
I got to drive to Kentucky, but thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Hey, I got to say something. We got to stay in touch somewhat because, you're just incredible. We got to get him as a state rep, Dave. He's got to become... We got to get him as a state rep. I don't care if he's from Illinois or wherever.
I've already talked to him about that. Yeah, we're counting down the days.
Excellent. Yeah, he'll do it. All right, Gabe. Take care. Safe travels to Kentucky. All right. Listen, we're going to talk property taxes right now. Lots and lots of people want to hear about property taxes. So we're going to get into that right now. Let's do this. Let me play this right here. I just got this today. I just literally got this a couple hours ago, but I want you to watch this guy here out in Madison, Ohio.
My name is Wade Headings. I'm a Madison resident, and I'm collecting petition signatures for the ballot. And a story I'd like to share is my neighbor. She's long retired. Her husband retired and has passed, so she's on a fixed income. Her property tax is probably approximately $400 a month. Now, she's on a fixed income and doesn't have the money. So, in all fairness, she should be relieved of tax at this age. She's raised her family, paid off her house, paid her tax all through the year. Now, in her last years, she shouldn't be paying property tax. She should be relieved and allowed to stay in her home. We're driving the seniors out of their homes. Now, here's something interesting.
He does not know who Brian Massey is. Brian, did you know that? He does not know who you are. I don't even know where he got this.
No, I didn't.
I don't even know where he got this.
My name is Wade Headings. I'm a Madison, driving the seniors out.
I think it's really cool. He's got that signage there. He made the state of Ohio abolish property tax, signed the petition. He just plug that in the ground. He's got a table out there. Any motorists going by and stuff can participate. I just thought it was really clever. That was a very clever thing to do.
Is that Kent had talked to me earlier.
That was the one that Kent was talking about. Yep, exactly. That guy right there. So we have his phone number. We can get in touch with him. But, I mean, he's not associated with you. I don't think he knows. I don't know how he got the petitions, but it's interesting. It'd be interesting to find out.
I think what happens is, Joe, we have the petitions available on a couple websites, one being Axe Ohio Tax. Hey, first let me say hello to one of my favorite state reps, David Thomas. Do appreciate you being on. You're doing a great job.
Brian.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let me introduce you a little bit here because I think that's only fair. We should do that. Republican member of the Ohio House of Representatives, District 65. So that's Ashtabula and Trumbull counties. And this is your first term, by the way, but it seems like you've been there forever. I see your face everywhere. You're always in the news. So you've been a lifelong...
It feels like I've been there forever.
Already, huh? Lifelong Ashtabula County resident. In the State House, you're vice chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, which is pretty impressive. And then you're a member of Energy, Personal Insurance and Pensions, Arts, Athletics, and Tourism Committees. So you're keeping very busy. Strong conservative, pro-life, pro-gun, small government, correct?
Yeah, you hit on the head, and definitely been a busy 5 months. I've joked with folks. I've kind of had 5 months to work on this property tax stuff and other issues that really we've not done much on for 5 years. So definitely staying busy, and enjoy your all support too.
Yeah. Well, let's not let that first clip go to waste. Let's expound on that because you're so involved. You're just so heavily involved in the property tax stuff. I'm just going to dive right in. I'm not even going to waste time. So here is a resident from Madison. We don't even know who he is. He doesn't know who we are. Somehow he got his hands on those signatures. He made the sign. He put up the table. He's out there just doing what he can. And he made the comment that his neighbor, that woman, is a long-time retiree. Her husband is dead. She's living in that house by herself. Her property tax is $400 a month. She's only got Social Security, and she can't afford it. And we hear that over and over. So let's just start there. What do you take on that?
Yeah, that's what I heard constantly as county auditor for Ashtabula. It's one of the reasons I ran, was just because there's so many of those folks that are out there. And I can tell you, at least from the legislative perspective, there's been a sea change, and I know John's on too, and Brian. And I've really, I think, been able to share just that frustration with fellow legislators that we've not seen since this crisis. But that story of the senior is one that happens really throughout the state. And that's kind of the motivation, one of the big drivers behind just what we've been trying to do from the legislative side. And I know there's a lot of other folks across the state who are, doing different pieces too, but that story is too common.
Yeah, way too common. All right, you did mention John. I want to say John Mara is with us. John is the mayor of Timberlake. Correct? Yeah, Timberlake. So if I go, hey, good to see you, man. If I go speeding through Timberlake, I know who to call, right? You're going to come to my rescue. You're going to help me out.
There's no mercy, Joe. No mercy.
Go slow. Just be safe.
Just be safe and go slow. Okay, so we have, let's see what this text, what this message says here. It says, Dave gets to blame local government for Columbus's problem. Dave tells us you and Columbus are going to fund local services like fire and emergencies. Cut the budget in Columbus, not local governments. So I read that, and I'm not 100% sure I understand it. Do you understand that question?
The question kind of gets at, and I hear that a lot, like, why doesn't the state fund certain things? And I always remind folks, one, the state is us. We're state taxpayers, our income tax and our sales tax. I always remind people, too, property taxes are a purely local tax. The state actually spends about $2 billion of our state income and sales tax dollars to help subsidize property taxes, but it's purely a local revenue. And I also have been trying to remind people too, it doesn't have to be the only revenue that local governments like fire and EMS use. We can dive right in. I was actually called the biggest defunder of the police about 3 weeks ago for my push to get rid of the inside millage aspect. Folks were saying we wanted to get rid of EMS, get rid of the police departments, because we wanted to relieve the property owner. So that might be what that text is kind of getting at, is why don't someone else pay for it? Your police, your fire, that's kind of decided by your local community. You can pay for it through your sales tax, your income tax, your property tax, but that is a local revenue, and that funding should be staying. I tell people too, I don't want to send my tax dollars, more of my tax dollars, down to Columbus and then hope Columbus sends it back to my area. I'd rather keep my money. I think that's a pretty conservative principle. Keep it as local as it can be, decide where it goes, and fund my local services how I want to.
Okay, let's one other discussion starter. This is along the lines of what you were just talking about. I happened to grab this off the
Our
internet.
concern, however, is that on the property owner side, they are purely tapped out. And if they have the ability, which I think they would, to fund your essential service through income tax or through sales tax, why shouldn't they have the right and the ability to fund you in a different way besides putting it all on the backs of the property owners?
While local control is important, relying on frequent levies creates unpredictability and instability for essential services like policing. Police departments require stable, predictable funding to maintain 24/7 readiness, pay salaries, meet pensions and obligations. I mean, again, we work on 3-year contracts, things like that. Things are decided upon pretty early on and over time. So going every year to get levies passed can create major uncertainty. Communities that experience failed levies face immediate cuts to staffing and longer response times directly impacting public safety. Stable inside millage ensures that police can provide consistent protection regardless of the outcome of an individual levy.
Do they want that 20 mil? Or they want it, I don't even understand it as well as you guys, but they don't want that tampered with. Now, at a certain point, that's their perspective. It ain't ours. It isn't the typical taxpayer. I know you got the unions that are breathing down your neck, and the police, the fire, and all these emergency services and everything. But Brian, if a so-called emergency service has priced themselves out of the market, is it really an essential service anymore? My question.
Well, what I've told, I live here in Concord Township, and I've told the township trustees and the administrator, I'm still willing to pay for police and fire, roads and bridges, sanitation. It's not that I'm saying that I don't want to pay for it. I just don't want any tax that is tied to my home. I say, you can send me a bill, but don't tie it to my house. I want to know how much I'm paying for the police department. I want to know how much I'm paying for the fire department. I want to know what I'm paying for roads and bridges, because I want to compare how our costs for those services, how does that compare to the other municipalities? And, it's, I get one bill on my tax statement that says I'm paying $2,000 to Concord Township. And I say, I want to have that broken out. Now, the auditor says, well, I can do that right now for you, Brian. I said, well, why don't you? He said, well, that'd cost us too much money. And I said, that's not an answer. What people what our elected officials don't understand is we do not want to be a renter from the government. It is our home. And if we're paying for services, come up with some other thing that you're going to call it. It's like a service charge. I look at, the police and fire as an insurance policy. I've got an insurance policy on my house. It's the same thing with police and fire. And the other thing with using home valuation for local services, why should I pay more or less than my neighbor because my house may be larger or smaller or valued higher or smaller That doesn't seem to make sense. We're using the police department and the fire department and roads and bridges basically the same. Maybe it should be on square footage of a house, or maybe the number of people in a house. That's how the services should be charged, and it's not just on valuation. And the problem with the inside millage, that when that property value goes up, if the property value goes up 10%, that the property taxes will go up 10%. And then we haven't even talked about the 20 mil floor for the schools. And Dave, Representative Thomas is one of the few legislators that understands all of that. Many of them don't even understand the whole complex property tax system. So he's probably got quite a job trying to be in a committee and trying to talk to people that don't even understand the property tax inside outside millage.
I'll tell you what,
that to be,
I'm only learning inside outside millage because I've been doing the podcast and stuff. I would be totally out in left field. Do you find that a lot of the state reps have no clue about inside outside millage?
Yeah. Well, just like, I've got reps that are doctors who know all about health insurance and different things like that. So when I've got a constituent who has a question on that aspect, I send them to that expert. But Brian's right. This is a very convoluted thing. I've spent most of my 5 months building relationships and kind of educating. The House gets it because we run every 2 years. We're typically who folks call first. This is the number one thing people call on, number one topic that our constituents reach out for. But I always kind of explain to people that a portion of your bill that's voted on and does not increase with your value, there's a portion of your bill that's not voted on and does increase with your value. That piece that increases with your value and it's not been your choice, I think that's where we target in and attack. And that's been part of what we've been trying to do as a legislative body.
John, let me get you in here if you don't mind. Put you on the spot here, but I know that you've been Brian, everybody, you're really involved in this whole process with the property taxes. So we have a state rep with us who's willing to do something. I mean, so do you have any questions?
He's doing a great job, honestly. I follow him on. I've been watching all the committee meetings. Ways and Means, the finance, through the Senate, through the budgets, listening to both sides. Actually, on the budget, I had to take the sides of the Dems on a lot of those issues that they brought up, and against the budget the way it is, because I don't agree with a lot of those either. I definitely don't believe in income tax cuts because that's cuts school funding right off the bat, so that's not good on that end. But, we get into this other misconception about, they think, well, you don't want the state to dictate how much money you're going to get for your local services, and then you're going to have to beg for your police, fire, and EMS services from the state. That's not what we're to do. I mean, those services, as a mayor of a village, 17% of a person's property tax bill goes to the village here for those services: police, fire, EMS, and all the other things, snow plowing, and roads and sewers and parks, everything. So we give them a lot for that 17%. And basically, and then we also have a 2% income tax that we get, and that brings in X amount of revenue. About a little more than half our revenue comes from that, and then the other half comes from the property tax. Well, on the property tax side, again, we've got a lot of inequities there because we have some residents paying $3,500 to Timberlake a year, and some only paying $477 a year. So, there's discrepancies there, but either way, it's very simple. We can just send everyone a service bill for it, and we can find a more fair and equitable way, which I came up with a hybrid formula. I mean, it's very simple to do, and it's something that we can just run through legislation through our council. Just like we pass all other legislation, we'll just pass legislation to be able to collect it through a third party, whether it be like we have RETA now collecting our income tax, we'll have another third party, or maybe through RETA collect that. So again, there's always something to do. I mean, there's people a lot smarter than me that can figure all the details out. All I know is just come up with the ideas, but there's always a solution for everything. And again, that's not what we're looking to do, to cut services. Again, people want to pay for their services, and I believe everyone should pay, honestly, even the seniors, because they need police, fire, EMS. But it should be a fair amount. It should be not based on the value of their home or tied to a certain thing. It should be a fair value amount, and that's what we need to do for that. Because again, we don't want, I don't believe anyone should not pay anything for those services. Those are needed. And that's where I think I have a problem with the homestead too, because when they give credits for the homestead, they're basically a chunk of that money is for like the municipalities, the parks, the libraries that the state's reimbursing. But why does the state have to reimburse that money? If they just took off the school funding portion, that would be a good homestead relief. And then let the seniors pay the rest of it, which is only a third of the tax bill, for the services they are receiving and getting and benefiting from. So, that whole system, again, is not even right, because I know we get part as a village, part of that homestead money. And again, I'm thinking, why we get it from the state? Why is the state giving us the money, and reimbursing us for what the homeowners should really be paying us? The state should be taking the school portion off. That's a real homestead exemption to me, and that's a break. And then again, what are they giving? They're giving crumbs back anyway. I mean, it's peanuts right now, and they're going to bump it up a little bit, but it only benefits a small portion. I mean, everyone's getting slammed. I mean, it's not just the seniors; it's middle age. It's like you said, young people. My son just graduated from college. Doesn't even think about it. He wants to rent, but he knows he has to rent with 2, maybe 3 buddies. And it's sad, because again, those days when I went to, when I got out of college, I bought a home right away. I got married, bought a home, fixed it all up. I mean, the American dream was there when I was growing up, and all I had to do is come out of college. I didn't even go to college. Come out of high school. I just started working. I was able to buy a house right away. So that's not like that anymore. And again, these kids can't have that dream anymore. And again, even if they did, they don't want it, because these houses are, they're getting older too. A lot of them are flipped, and they're using those higher appraised values when they flip these houses to value everyone's house that hasn't been upgraded. And that's another thing. And plus, it was a time when these houses were built in the 50s and 60s, but now these houses are 50, 60, 70 years old. How much now they need to be depreciating, which they're doing now through the mass appraisal method, but they're depreciating the houses, but they're appreciating the land way up and making the land way valuable. And that's another issue. We talk about the mass appraisal method, but that's what throws everything out of whack.
Let's take a look here at this question. After this last reappraisal, Lorain County property owners are paying $34 million in additional property taxes. Do counties really need that much additional funding? I mean, come on. The reason they upped it was so that. Let me ask you this: they were doing fine the previous year. Now all of a sudden they got $34 million in free money at the expense of the taxpayers, because you have to do some kind of an adjustment for inflation or something like that. I don't know. What do you think?
Every 3 years, property values get updated. And this is probably where that first text question kind of came from. I've been very consistently reminding people that when property values go up, local governments do not have to collect the increased tax revenue that comes from higher property values. Many actual local entities don't know, or they tell me they don't know, that they didn't actually have to receive all of that. But it's totally up to every county commissioner, every school board member, all of your local entities. Do they actually accept that increased revenue? Lorain County is one example. Sounds like $34 million. I know Lake County has had about $3 to $4 million, just the county government itself, in increased taxes every year. Ashtabula and Trumbull right about $2 to $3 million. And I've been going around asking local entities, do you actually need this money? And that's part of what we're doing in the budget. Brian Massey was very helpful with that. Chris Galloway was tremendous with a lot of the language, the auditor from Lake County, to essentially have that question be asked. The county government in Lorain County, for the person that texted that question in, your county commissioners will be on record now. Whenever a revaluation happens, they have to actually formally say, we're taking that money. No longer can you say, well, the state forced us to take it. I've actually heard that. The state doesn't force anything except for just updating values. What happens for the tax dollars, that's totally up to your local entity. So your local officials now will be able to decide, do we actually need this money? They're going to have to tell the Budget Commission now, here's what we actually need the money for. If the Budget Commission doesn't think they need it, Budget Commission can actually completely freeze those higher property taxes, and your tax rate actually decrease, your bill stay roughly the same. So there's going to be a lot of these local controls and pressure valves being in place after this budget that we passed last week just for that exact question of revaluation happens. Nothing really changed outside of just property values are higher now, but revenues are much more higher from the tax rates. And do those local entities actually need the revenue? I had one school tell me, I was visiting in Mahoning County, a school tell me, we're capping school carryovers, for example, at 40%. You'd be amazed at how much cash many of our schools across the state have. School told me, well, we were planning on giving our teachers 6% raises over the next 5 years. We can't do that if you cap our carryovers. We're not going to have the cash for it. And I kind of responded like, you all are the poster children for the spending side that's gotten completely out of control. And if you're saying that this new tax revenue coming in is needed for those types of increases, your voters didn't approve that. They had no choice over it. We need to give that back to the voters and have them approve actually those types of increases.
Yeah, you got to give it back, but I don't know how many are going to actually give it back.
Joe, can I chime in here?
That happening.
That was what Rep. Thomas said was huge. And I picked up on. Thank you, Representative Thomas, for changes in the county budget commission. You know that I was. Very adamant that when I attended the Lake County Budget Commission, there were really basically rubber stamps because of rulings by Prosecutor Colson. But I know that you jumped on that issue, and I appreciate you going to bat for the ordinary people. And it's going to be very interesting now. I will be going to when the taxing authority turns in their tax budget, we're going to actually see what if there's going to be a major change in that, because I agree that all of the taxing authorities in Lake County, they accepted all of the money, and that's including Lake Metro Parks that had $30 million in cash, and they got, I think, was $400,000 because of the revaluation without a vote of the people. And they said, we still need it to keep the parks clean and safe.
That's what I'm saying. They're not going to give this money back. They're just not.
Well, they never do. But now we've got hopefully we've got rules and regulations of the county budget that can say, no, you can't take that money. I hope that's what happens.
It would be forced. Essentially,
one question. Is this House Bill 309? Is this House Bill 309?
Yes. So 309 was put into the budget.
It's in the budget. Okay. Excellent.
Yes.
And the carryover amount is 40%?
For schools, yes.
Schools can carry over 40% of their operating budget, the maximum 40%. Or if they carry over more, don't they can put it through to some kind of capital improvement, correct?
There's reserve funds that they can put it in. If they put it in the reserve fund, it says explicitly this money is for a school bus in 2 years. They have to spend on the school bus. If they don't, tax rate decreases.
Okay, and who's going to be auditing? This is the problem I have, Dave. Like I was checking on Medicaid. They have a fraud team. They don't catch a damn thing when it comes to Medicaid. So who's going to be checking on all these 600 school districts? And if they have a little bit of a carryover money, that it's really going to where it's supposed to be going?
Two different groups. One, Budget Commission, which as of right now has almost no authority. After the budget, almost unilateral authority. Schools are clamoring and other entities to have the governor veto this. Other group would be the Auditor of State's office. They audit schools every single year. If a reserve account's set up, they look specifically for what language was used to put the money in. Where's the money coming out? That's one of their top specific things they check.
All right. Let me get Jonathan. Go ahead. I don't want to ignore you. Go ahead.
Oh boy. So my messages are going to be targeted at Dave and Gabe and anybody young. We need to doge Ohio. Absolutely. It's mission critical. I don't know where to begin with this whole discussion. There's a part of it that really riles me. It makes me angry. We've conceded defeat on so many different levels. It's mind-boggling. I work in finance, and the things that I see happening, and I've been reporting on this for a long time now, in school districts and other places, is malfeasance. It's not anything short of that, and I'm not using that as hyperbole. It's academic, and fiscal malfeasance. It is abuse of taxpayers. And until we actually delve into and figure out ways to address taxpayer fraud and abuse, we're going to continue to have this sort of shell game conversation about, well, since we're spending $2 billion a month on school or whatever, you fill in the blank, a preposterous number. We're used to that, and the money disappears somewhere. So how do we shuffle things around to continue to give $2 billion? And at some point, and I think it should have been about 40 years ago, people really should have stepped up and gotten into the fray and fought back against these things. I'm one of the co-creators of the Ohio Academic Accountability Project. Omar Tarazi and I created that. I'm going to use schools as an example. With the Ohio Academic Accountability Project, you can look into school districts and see most, but not all, of their financial reports. And it comes directly from the Ohio Department of Education. And there are some school districts, just using, again, schools as an example, and this can be applied to parks and recreation, it can be applied to roads and bridges. The spend in some school districts is north of $40,000 per year per student for barely literate. So as a starting point, it's crazy to me to be in this conversation where we're talking about maybe we should move things around and shuffle things this way. I will not concede defeat. And I think that people like Gabe, I get a good vibe from Gabe, I think his generation will be the type to go in and really put the thumb screws. And there's an analogy that holds true, and I think of it often. I reference this in a lot of the long-form posts that I do. There's a sort of an analogy that's used. It's called the water bucket transfer. I forget what exactly the term is that describes it. But they used to transfer water from person to person with a giant bucket. It's actually how they used to put out fires before they created pressure and water hoses. But they would transfer water. And lo and behold, of course, if you have a giant bucket of water, by the time you've transferred it 10, 20, 30 different times, the amount of water that the last person gets is very, very little. That's the way that government works. And so, to Dave's point, absolutely, keep funding as local as possible. And I'm going to put it in a different way, and just using, again, hypothetical numbers. Would you pay $10,000 for something that you can get for $200? We are in a position where most of the things that we allow for in our lives relative to government expense are 80 to 1,000 times the expense reality. If we can, and using, there was a video that Joe showed of a police, I back the blue. I'm a big back the blue guy, but there's a huge bureaucracy built around our law enforcement, just like there is in schools. We see these massive increase of administrative staff in schools, and they constantly spend money. And in my county, I can point to thousands of places I see it. In my county of Geauga, we're rural, and we had a surplus, I think, around $6 million. Well, that's evaporated. These institutions, these legacy institutions, are really good at spending money as inefficiently as possible. So when it comes to all of this stuff, when it comes to what do we do with property taxes, what do we do to shift things around to maybe sales taxes or use tax, those kinds of things, I think that we continue to tie ourselves into bundles if we continue to have a conversation about funding things the same way that we do, because they're overfunded and they're rife with fraud. I'm sorry, but I've got to throw all that stuff in there because I'm very hopeful that DOGE manages to actually foment in Washington, D.C. I'm doubtful because there's so much corruption there. But think of it this way. There's an amazing good that came out of DOGE, and that's public awareness. Now we have sort of a thing to point to talk about how massive fraud can get. And if we think for 1 minute Ohio is somehow different and doesn't have the mass fraud, or even counties like my rural county of Geauga, the waste, fraud, and abuse is rampant. And to me, again, bear with me. I'm a finance person. I've worked for decades on and off Wall Street. I know how finance works. If we don't correct the problem, we're just going to continue to kick the can down the road, shuffle things around, and continue to harm people, like those elderly that we learned about earlier who are being kicked out of their homes. So my heart and my belief and my hope and my prayers go first to Doge, Ohio.
Well, okay, so let me piggyback off that. Let's listen to this, because Brian, you were on the State House News. I don't know if you caught it or not, but the reason I want to go to this is, Dave, are we at the point where the only thing we can do now is just get rid of property taxes altogether and throw it in the lap of the state lawmakers and see what they come up with? But I want to play this here. This is off the State House News Bureau here.
A constitutional effort to abolish property taxes in Ohio won't be on this year's ballot. Backers of that proposal say they won't turn in petitions ahead of next week's deadline, but instead plan to put it before voters next year. With the deadline to submitting petitions just days away, Brian Massey, with the Committee to Abolish Ohio's Property Taxes, has decided to make it an election issue in 2026, and not this year.
And we want to hear what the gubernatorial candidates are going to say about property taxes.
The group would have needed nearly 443,000 valid signatures to make this year's ballot. Massey won't say how many signatures have been collected so far. He says the group will continue to circulate petitions to submit signatures next year. Joe Ingles at the Ohio Public Radio State House News Bureau.
All right, so Brian, you were on the State House News Bureau. I don't know if you knew you were, but you were.
Well, I do remember speaking to Joe Ingles. She had the number wrong. I think she said 443. It's 413,000 and some odd number, but it's 413. But she is correct. We are going to make it an election issue in 2026. And just let Representative Thomas know that we're getting an awful lot of signatures from Ashtabula. Just want to let you know that. There must be.
My almost go-to comment to folks down in Columbus are, I usually leave my conversations, just met with the Municipal League this past week. I ask them, how strong do you think this group is? Usually they say, well, do they have money? They seem kind of more grassrootsy. And I tell them, like, this is a reality. If we're not going to do big things, this will happen. And then what are you going to do? And usually they say, well, it's not our problem. And I remind them, it is literally your tax. This is your decision for how high your tax rates are for what you're doing. And, to your earlier question, in my mind, to kind of answer the earlier point too, we can shift things around. And if we're not actually doing the spending side, then we're just going to put a whole big burden on somewhere else and not actually cut the size of government. You got to have spending reform and decrease the spending if you're going to do tax reform too.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get John in here for a second. John, when they switch it off, let's say they switch it off of property tax and just throw it all under RETA. I mean, that's not. Is that what we're trying to do here?
RETA collects on the income tax side. That would collect on the income. We already get 2% there. Actually, we're looking at trying to give our residents a 0.5% credit on that RETA part. So that's what we're looking at now, because we're running a nice tight budget. But on the property tax side, we are depending on that. But that again is for part of the services. So, like Brian Massey said, we're just going to send them a bill and we'll figure something out legislative wise to do it. But that's not the biggest problem. I mean, the biggest problem right now is, like I said, we need major property tax reform, and legislators aren't listening. And again, they may not take it seriously, but this is grassroots. I mean, people are out there voluntarily. We're seeing more and more people every day, just thousands of people circulating. So, it's grown, and again, I know we're going to get the signatures. I know it's going to get on the ballot. So they better take it seriously, because it's going to happen, and it's going to be a problem. But, we've been telling for years and years and years to fix it. And if they would just follow the law, the Duroff case, that would be a start too. And, take the time, like I said, we don't mind paying for services, but don't tie it to our homes. And the whole major thing of this whole reform is that, they put the collection of all these taxes on our property. And then if we run into the inability to pay, as you know, Representative Thomas, for 3 consecutive pay cycles, they turn it over to a third-party tax lien holder. And then from there, they have 3 years or a year before they sell the tax liens. They hold the tax liens for a year before they begin foreclosure. So that's the process by the law, and that's what we're stuck with. And that's where it's not fair, and people are losing their homes because of that. And that's, again, we need to get this major tax reform, property tax reform in Ohio. And again, Rep. Thomas is doing a phenomenal job, but I see the pushback. I see, and it's hard because a lot of them don't understand that, this is a real issue. And, again, it's an uphill battle all the way for us.
Yeah, it is a real issue.
Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, we know that we're going to get tremendous pushback from the schools, and we also found out something this week. John and I found out something. The other pushback will probably be from builders, and I said, well, why would builders be objecting to that? And that is, but because of this TIF that they get, taxpayer incremental financing, that they get prepayment of property taxes to spend on a development. If they've got, a serious issue in the development, rather than the builder coming up with the money, they go to the schools or the municipality and they work out a TIF, where the schools will give up 75% or so of their property taxes, and that will be given to the developer. So we're going to get pushback from a lot of people, but we're populous. We're going to support the ordinary people, that home ownership is a foundation of freedom and liberty. And our Gabe has got to impress upon that to the younger generations. When they say that you'll own nothing and you're going to be happy, you got to take that seriously. So are we going to be a socialized nation, a communist nation, where you don't have home ownership? Well, this is the start of it, and we are going to keep pushing forward to get signatures to get it on the ballot. We're not giving up. And many politicians, even though we don't have the George Soros type money that's supporting us, and we're paying for this all ourselves, and we certainly expect, whether it's the builders or the schools, they'll get their lawyers. They probably already have their legal briefs already written if the people pass this, just like they did with the DeRolf case when the Supreme Court said that was unconstitutional, and then the lawyers got involved, and they I don't know how many years, but there were many court cases dealing with the DeRolf case, and I assume that this is going to happen again with this eliminating property tax amendment as a constitutional amendment. It probably will happen, but the people need someone. They need a voice. Unfortunately, we were led to believe that when we went to the ballot box and we voted for representatives and senators, that they were looking out for the ordinary people. They were not. They were looking out for the donor class. Those days are over. Once we get it on the ballot, then the politicians are going to realize the people have to have a voice in our government. We don't right now, and that's I'll exclude Representative Thomas, because we've said he's done a great job and he's had a lot of pushback. We know that, and we appreciate what he is doing.
All right. So this is not directed against you, Dave. As a matter of fact, I'm glad that you're coming on this show. We got somebody to talk to, and you've been so involved with the whole property tax issue. So we appreciate it. But we have to have a punching bag. We have to have a punching bag that we can go after. All right, CRAs, JEDD, and more. Not just TIFs. This is numerous ways to divert property tax from schools and other property tax levy services from their original use.
Yep.
Do you want to expound? Somebody, Dave, you expound on that for me, please, because I don't know what it means.
So Brian's absolutely right. when we introduced the idea of eliminating inside millage, which is just, the first 10 mils of your tax bill, that portion that you haven't voted on, the the amount of special interest groups, I always joke with folks that the regular taxpayer, their lobbyist is the state rep or state senator, but every local government has their own lobbyist. Every different group and development group has their own lobbyist too. Definitely outnumbered. Property taxes and economic development are completely tied together now. How most financing of projects work is actually through the tax bill. So if that's TIFs, where you divert a part of the tax bill to pay for sewer or for water or for roads, for example, if that's a CRA, which is a Community Reinvestment Act area, that decreases the total burden and essentially gives an abatement for that home or for that business. That could be as well bonds. Most local governments, I know, for example, you all in Lake County, they do this, in Ashtabula as well. They use part of their actual unvoted taxes to pay for certain projects like a jail or other pieces. Those are tied directly with the property tax revenue as well. So when we proposed eliminating 20%, 15% of the tax bill, the amount of pushback we got from the economic development side, because they're all so intertwined, was tremendous. And that's just a virtue of property taxes being a 200-year-old tax in Ohio, when we've just piled on different pieces to try to give exemptions for some or try to push development for others. But all those different areas of examples that she had written out are ways that essentially the property tax dollars are used then for economic development projects right where the property is. And you take away the property tax. I actually had businesses reach out to me saying, you can't decrease our taxes. We need that money for the TIF to pay back our bondholders for this building that we're doing and we need to finish. And I laughed. When in the world we're talking about lowering taxes being bad for business? So it's just a fascinating thing of how interwoven our property tax side is now with our business side in the state.
Hey, let me, whenever we do a show, I always have to throw Pleshnik in. Let me throw Pleshnik in here for a second. He is not live, but I kind of like what he has to say here.
This has got to stop. The problem is, at every level of government, they've gotten so addicted to our money that the immediate response you get when you say we need to reform property taxes, they go, but how will government afford this? It's like, government's not paying the bills. Government doesn't afford anything. We're the ones paying, and we're telling you. We're not asking, we're telling you we can't afford it anymore. And I'm not really concerned with what you have to cut or what hard times your government agency is going to go through. Government is supposed to sacrifice for and serve the people, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
So I like that comment. That actually piggybacks on the intention of my comment about Doge, Ohio. We need to figure out where to cut and what to clean up. I mostly agree with that sentiment, but I know from experience that if you tell an entity or organization cutting some of your funding and you need to figure out where those cuts are going to take place, they're going to make sure that the cuts take place in a very visible, painful way to create the appearance that they need the money. So by way of example, and this is an unfortunate one, and it's one that's clearly near and dear to me, in education, when you talk about education cuts, the first place left to their own devices or school districts are going to cut is in staffing, extracurriculars, sports, band, those sorts of things, transportation, and they're going to make a big visible splash out of it. Meanwhile, they might have 30 people in their DEI department all making $200,000 a year or whatever. They'll hide that. So piggybacking on Plechnik's comment, anytime we talk to any governmental organization and tell them, just as Commissioner Plechnik just very well put in his comments, no, you cannot have the blank check anymore. You cannot overspend year after year and add another 3% or whatever every year and continue to conduct academic and fiscal malfeasance. You need to make the cuts. It's then up to us to tell them where the cuts are expected. And in past podcasts, I've illustrated a number of examples. If you talk to anybody, and you can pick any avenue, any area where our state government or local government touches, you can find the actual price tag for a thing, what something should cost. Call it a pothole. If it costs $10,000 to fill a pothole, we have found our way to costing $3 million to fill a pothole. And you have to wait 10 years. That's because of fiscal irresponsibility and taxpayer abuse. So when it comes to Commissioner Plechnik's comments, what I say is, no, we're going to tell you where those cuts are going to take place. We don't want the CRT DEI stuff. That stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion, for anybody that's unclear about that, or any of this Green New Deal stuff that's masquerading as a climate action plan, which is something we're seeing coming out of Cleveland via an organization called NOACA. We've covered them in a previous conversation. All of that stuff, it is sucking up massive amounts of taxpayer money, and they're just spending it willy-nilly, wildly, on all sorts of ridiculous things, like painting murals on the sides of buildings, and then claiming that they don't have enough money. Same thing with Parks and Rec, and we've got the Metro Park system all throughout Cuyahoga County. And no, it doesn't cost $1 million a month to groom and landscape. It's most of the money is evaporating into pockets. So I'm sticking with my original flashpoint, my original point. We need to doge all this stuff. We need to clean it up, because until then, we're just going to continue to chase these issues around. And if we don't do it successfully, we're going to end up with two very possible, very likely negative things. The cuts are going to be made in ways that will hurt and harm the public. We would suddenly, for instance, end up with fewer police on the streets, which none of us actually want. But we would still have a bloated bureaucracy within the administrative state of law enforcement, or we would end up with roads and bridges falling apart. But meanwhile, our Department of Transportation would soak up all kinds of millions of dollars. We need to be very clear and clear-eyed about what we want to accomplish as we push the needle on this populist movement.
All right, here's what I'm going to do at this point. It's just we're going to go kind of a lightning round. So a question, just direct a question to Dave. Let's try to go boom, 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 and then we'll call it a night because it's getting late. But let me start off. Put that chat back up. Let's see what it said. Okay, home rule political subdivisions have no checks and balances. Commissioner have little authority and the state does not interfere. I don't know if that's a question, but
here's
a good
right. There's no checks and balances.
All right, you can answer that question, Dave, and also this one here right after that. Okay, go ahead.
So they do have a lot of authority, and I am literally pleading, traveling around the state, asking local entities to decrease their tax rates. We weren't able to force them to decrease through the inside village piece, but every county, every school board, every entity has the ability to actually decrease their tax rates. And it gets back to the spending piece. If we're prioritizing, there's extra all around. And to that question now, too, at the state level, there's extra as well. Lots of questions over the rainy day fund. How much is actually in there? We have a cap of our rainy day fund at 10%. It's currently right around 5%. It is about 2 weeks worth of spending at the state level. That has stayed pretty consistent. We're not actually adding more revenue to it. We're keeping it right about 2 weeks of spending. And frankly, to use for certain times, if, for example, all the local revenue goes away, we would use it to help backfill and move other pieces. But it's about $3.5 billion or so that we could use from the rainy day fund. Property taxes are roughly $22 billion. So we talk about pure numbers. We could actually empty that tomorrow folks would not see much of an impact.
Gotcha. Okay.
Wait a minute. So $3.5 billion is 2 weeks of. Did I follow the numbers properly on that? $3.5 billion is it can't be. That's more than 2 weeks of spending.
If you look at the total budget for the state, roughly two weeks.
So you got a rainy day fund of $3 billion, you said.
Yeah.
Brian, got a question?
Yeah, it's we talked about the growth of government, and we see that in Lake County. It's not the property taxes, but Lake Tran has increased and will increase from July 1 the sales tax another 0.25%. And this was an entity, a taxing authority that had over $60 million, and there's never enough for them, and they continue to take money out of the pockets of the taxpayers. But as we say, there's no checks and balances. There's no one in county government that can say to Lake Tran, what are you doing? Why are you continuing to take money from the taxpayers? So I agree. Whoever said there's no checks and balances, that is absolutely correct. There's been no checks and balances. Perhaps the changes to the budget with the Budget Commission, maybe that'll have something to do with it, but I don't know if the Budget Commission can impact Lake Tran. There's just too much money being taken out of the taxpayers' hands for the government.
Brian, every transportation is different. Does Lake County have a property tax levy with Lake Tran, or is it purely just sales tax? And who appoints that board?
Sales tax. Yeah, it's sales tax. The commissioners appoint the board, as I understand it. But again, you never really see commissioners going to the Lake Tran and objecting to what they're doing. So this idea that we've got local control, it's the same thing with the school boards. Many of the school boards, unfortunately, they don't have the financial acumen to look at the financial statements and determine whether the school board is good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah. We always tell folks we get the government we elect, in a sense, and that's very, very true at the local level, where we want things to stay, and that's the most impactful then to our budgets. But it's usually where we pay the least amount of attention to, even though that's where most of our money actually goes.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
There's a connected point, if I could interject really quickly. There's a connected point to that, and this is apparently my hill I'm going to die on tonight. Lake Tran makes a very good example, because Lake Tran merged with Geauga County and assumed public transportation for now 2 counties. And there was a huge study that was done not long ago that showed if you provide ride on demand, we can save like 85% of the budget or something. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I'm ballparking. But if you can cut Lake Tran budget by 85% by simply having vans available, and people could use an app or online service or something and say, I need to get from point A to point B at such and such a time, and provide that ride on demand, we can cut massive cost. And it's my understanding that it was a universal vote from Lake Tran that no, they want to run those mostly empty buses all up and down the streets all day, every day, full of air and very few passengers, in the odd chance that maybe that schedule lines up with somebody that needs to be transferred from somewhere. Same thing in Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati with their massive public transportation systems. If you have the ability to cut cost, in other words, these organizations are beyond reluctant. They are adamant that they will not cut cost.
Yeah.
It's 100%,
one thing I thought about that, if you just Ubered, if you just took the budget and created and gave it to Uber drivers who could pick somebody up, take them where they're supposed to go, and just pay the Uber drivers, I think it would be a fraction of what you're dealing with the Lake Tran and RTA and all those others.
That's correct, Joe. And I was at the last Lake Tran meeting, and ODOT has asked Lake Tran, Lake County's transportation company, to take over Lorain County. So they're going to bypass, Cuyahoga and go over to Lorain County because Lorain County is having trouble. So what we're doing in Geauga they want to take over Lorain County. So this is another prime example of government just growing by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, government's too big for its britches. Too big, man. And we need some good mayors. Oh, there's one. Hey, I'm going to let you wrap it up tonight, John. So last question for Dave, and we're going to call it a night, okay? Okay.
I think you're muted, John.
Yeah.
You guys, I don't want you guys to hear everything in the background. Sorry about that. But yeah, anyway, on the budget that was passed, I know coming out of the House, I didn't see anything about income tax, a decrease in income tax. And then again, out of the Senate, they had that tax cut. And I'd like to know, again, why they know that funds the schools, because Senator DeWine said, I think on Bob France a couple of weeks ago, he said that the state needs that funding from the income tax for school funding. So basically, I guess, why did the Senate put that in there, and why was it, reduced the way it was?
So we actually increased school funding, and this gets back to one of my big frustrations. It is never enough. We can keep giving. We've given them roughly $1 billion to $1.5 billion every 2 years, and it's never enough money for what they want. In this budget, we actually ended up giving them just shy of $750 million extra in funding. You're right, John. The Senate, essentially, one of their big, absolutely had to do it, was creating a flat tax for Ohio. That cuts our revenue at the state level by roughly $1.5 billion every year. It's forcing us to cut our state budget, which is good. We need to be doing that, but we're still increasing school funding. So we essentially spend on public primary and secondary education a little over $12 billion. Our actual income tax revenue to the state is a little over $10 billion. So the income tax does go towards public education, but we also use part of the sales tax as well. We're anticipating revenues increasing whenever you cut taxes by a lot. People invest more, they move here more. So that's one of the reasons the House agreed with the Senate to have that flat tax piece. But we are still giving quite a bit more to public education. It's never going to be enough for what they actually want, unfortunately.
Hey, Dave, thanks for all you're doing there at the State House. We really appreciate it. We got to have you on again, and we just like to have somebody that we can punch around because we get frustrated. This whole property tax thing. We really appreciate you. Really appreciate
you guys educating and sharing out with people. We actually did quite a lot in the budget for property taxes. It's the most we've done in terms of reforms since the crisis started. I have a whole bunch of information on my Facebook page and website, all the different pieces of it, but it's not nearly, we need to do a ton more. The Speaker agrees, the House agrees. So we're going to keep plugging along 100% and really appreciate what you guys do to help educate the public.
All right.
Thank you very much, David.
Yeah, thank you. God bless you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Hey, thanks again. John Morrow, thank you. Jonathan,
Yep.
Brian, thank you. Kent, behind the
Thanks,
scenes,
everyone.
thank you. God bless you. See you.
All right, see you, everybody.
Go.